Terry Austin will be here shortly. He was at a Botetourt Board of Supervisors meeting, and he's on his way. Senator Deeds has sent positive info back, and he's checking with some different folks in Richmond about the idea of the legality of our idea for board makeup. We've also gotten reports back from the attorneys, which Terry had asked that we look at unintended consequences of this, of our proposed board makeup. And we'll probably talk about that a little bit more when Terry gets here. We haven't gotten any kind of reports back from our people we talked to about, unless I just recently got one, about the physical study that we're talking about, facility study. We're hoping to hear some information back. I was supposed to hear back from 2 of them before tonight's meeting, and they didn't get back to me. So I hope to hear more about that. As far as everything else that's going on, I believe it's all going to rely on Jim and is Dick coming?
Said he was.
Okay.
Talked to him yesterday.
Okay. Maybe we'll just hand things over to you and let you get started, and we'll hope that Terry will join us very soon.
I have a question. I don't know Terry Austin. Mm-hmm. How long has he been in the General Assembly? How long has he been in your building?
I think this would be 8 years. I think it's been in 6 years. 6 years.
I'm not as versed on the delegates, gentlemen, because I worked for the Senate Finance Committee for 12 years on staff from 87 to 99, so I'm kind of a Senate guy. And I do know a lot of delegates. I just happen to know this gentleman. So I was just curious what his experience level was, and what committees he might be on, etc., because it's important to their influence, what they do.
He's on House Appropriation.
Yeah, big shake-up.
It can
Is he
vary.
Democrat or Republican?
Republican.
Okay.
So we're working both sides of the aisle, and our senator and delegate is on our team.
I tried to boil into the executive summary sort of the key points. You know, if you look at your combined together, you know, even though Covington's it's increasing slightly in students, Allegheny is losing, both of you together would still be losing them over time, notwithstanding, I think, what you said, because this has been going on for a number of years, the loss of general loss of students, and it fits with the population. If you look at Weldon Cooper 2010 census, which I did, and then you look at their estimates of each year, and then their projections in 20, 30, and 40, they're projecting continued declines in population. So, along with population, student counts are going to follow. So I assume that would continue. We also looked. Your divisions are similar in characteristic. Racial characteristics similar. Student achievement levels seem to be similar. So that makes consolidation, in my book, it would seem to make it easier. I know that's been, those kind of issues have been, to be frank, an issue in Martinsville and Henry. So they're not the same here, and so that would seem to make it easier. You can see how state funding follows students because the SOQ is paid on a per pupil basis. So when you lose students, you lose state funding, and all else being equal. Of course, there is inflationary increases, there's policy increases, which could offset the nominal number, but you're going to lose that per pupil amount. You saw Covington gaining students there, so they actually, increased their state aid over the time period we looked at, because they gained some students. And when you throw in inflation and policy increases, that they got a significant amount of additional state funding, whereas Allegheny County did not, because of the greater loss in students, and then the loss of it looks worse than it is because of the loss of the LCI that you were using from Clifton Forge consolidation. So it wasn't as much as it would appear. because of that fact. It was interesting to me to see that the Allegheny school divisions, you can see it, their pupil-teacher ratio in Allegheny it declined. They got less pupils per teacher over time that we looked at, because it's difficult to reduce numbers of teachers as numbers of pupils are declining, because you still have to run classrooms. And so that's sort of a statewide phenomenon with localities that lose students. They lose an economy of scale, so to speak. They still have to run classrooms, but the thinking was that in my view, and this is where it's going to get difficult, I think, when you consolidate your schools, it will provide you, I hope, an opportunity to have more flexibility in making your pupil-teacher ratio a little more efficient, let's put it that way, so you could save some money, because you're pretty low compared to statewide averages in Allegheny. Covington's closer to statewide averages, but Allegheny is pretty low now. So that's an opportunity in a consolidated school district. And you kind of see that, I realize you've got to be really sensitive to actual individuals. And so that's why, as one of the savings measures, I talk about is a possibility is an ERIP, an early retirement incentive program, that has been used in various places, different ways, but I gave you an example of one that Rockbridge County used. And it was another interesting thing I noticed doing this was you have a lot of teachers that are pretty old. I mean, in the terms of the salary scale, 25 years or more. There's quite a few in both school divisions. So that's something that you should be aware of. If you do this, you would hate to have too many retire on you, I guess, at one time. So, because you're going to obviously need teachers and skilled teachers and mentors for ones you bring in. But if you manage this right, there's a savings. You would not only right-size your pupil-teacher ratio, but the teachers you brought in would be at the lower salary scale, so you'd save money there as well in the long run. The other thing, I looked at for you was looking at both the central offices. And when you consolidate a school division, I'm new to this subject. I'm not new to K-12 in Virginia, but I'm new to look, because there's not very many of them that consolidate. So I know Dick has done a couple, but I took a look at the central office, and you saw the table in there, right? And it didn't need a whole lot of explanation. I think that in a school division, even consolidated of your size, you certainly wouldn't need two sets. And how you get from A to B, again, there's people involved. That's why you have to figure out a way, to make things work for those people. And that's why this early retirement, I think you really need to think about how to, if you're going to go down this route and you want to make it more efficient, save money, because that's where the savings would be in right-sizing pupil-teachers, consolidating central offices, lower salaries with people coming in. Yes. Oh, Delegate Austin, your last name? Jim Reginald. How are you?
Jim Terry Austin. Pleasure to meet you. Yes, sir.
I saw interesting differences. Was Allegheny had lower pupil-teacher ratios. They did have higher administrative, operation, maintenance. Transportation costs are obviously the reason it's such a large county, of a lot more space to cover. There might be some savings there with the consolidated district. Some people might not have to travel as far with what schools you have open and how you arrange that. So that's possible as well. I think trying to, in a consolidated district, an opportunity to right size, the O&M and the administrative costs. That will give you an opportunity to do that, because they were quite a bit higher in Allegheny than statewide averages. Not to forget the transportation, the O&M and administration. So that's another area where in consolidated district you can take a look at places to save. Salaries were generally higher for teachers and some other groups, and I put a table in here in Covington than Allegheny, except for the teachers in the early years. They had a flat scale through year 6 in Covington. So first year someone gets hired, it looked to me like they were pretty similar. And then because Allegheny had to step up in scale, that you paid a little bit more for your teachers through year 5 or 6. And then immediately you get to that, Covington bounced theirs up from their first step to after they kept it flat to the year 6, then they immediately were paying more. So everything beyond that, they were paying more, even though they had a shorter scale. Even their 25th scale would pay more than and their officer would pay more than your 35th scale. So what I did to look at not anyone losing salary, and when you consolidated, was I literally took the higher salary of the two and gave it to that person. So if the Covington was making less those early years, they got the higher Allegheny salaries. That only amounted to $13,000. So it was pretty small because there's not that many of them either in that early scale. So, and then plug in all the Allegheny teachers, and then there was a few other categories I had as well, and it came up to, I'd like to pull that table up, it came up to $465,000 would be the cost so nobody lost any, nobody was paid less. I looked at benefits separately. So I also did secretaries, custodians, and teacher assistants, and you can see the amount of compensation increase you would need. And that included everything but the health benefits. Because I think you need to make a decision about that too. Because both systems give pretty good health benefits. Covington very good, but even Allegheny pretty good, especially compared to statewide averages and your surrounding localities. Covington very good. So if you look on table 20 for health benefits, you can see these are the comparable counties surrounding you or nearby, and you're pretty much higher. And then the statewide average at the bottom, you have very good health benefits here. So one of the ideas would be, I'm on page 41, Dick, we're talking about health benefits right now. You could slow your increase in employer-provided benefits to match the Allegheny level. You bring the Covington down, maybe I'm talking about new hires, let's say, not existing. Grandfather people in, they're existing. The new hires, you could put them more at the Allegheny scale. That would save money, for at least from Covington's perspective, into how you do this. And you could even slow down your increase if you wanted to match closer to your surrounding localities. So that's an area in consolidation you could do going forward, especially as you get new hires. Again, how you implement that would require some thinking.
And I think that's one thing that everybody's kind of talked about. We don't want this to negatively impact anyone.
Yeah, the point being is not, you're not going to slam into this right away. The point being is consolidation gives you an opportunity to make some changes that can have long-term savings for you. Especially as you get new people. Like I said, there's a lot of individuals in your school divisions that have been there a long time. I don't have any idea how long they're going to stay, but if you were trying to right size and provide an early retirement incentive program, you're going to have new people that are going to be lower in the scale, and you can do some different things with. So your fiscally stressed localities, as evidenced on table 16, it's a simple way to look at the Commission on Local Government's fiscal stress index. They've got Covington ranked the 9th most fiscally stressed locality in Virginia, and Allegheny ranked at 39. So you're fiscally stressed, and that's reflected in your composite index.
How many total?
There's there's 95 counties and 36 cities, so it's 100 and
There's 130,
32 or something.
134 school divisions
Yeah.
that have the LCI.
yeah, but this is a local government rank, so there's a few more localities than that, but not many. It's in the 130s.
We couldn't live without Northern Virginia's monetary contribution. Our school systems would be in total disaster.
Yeah, they send more money to Richmond than they ever get back.
60% right now, 60% of all the revenue in Virginia comes from Northern Virginia, unfortunately. That's a problem we need to fix, but right now that's the situation. So
Your population and your school population and your regular pie is declining. It'll probably continue to decline to a certain degree. Your LCI is going to stay relatively low, most likely. Allegheny has a fairly low per pupil relative to the state and Covington pupil-teacher ratio, because it kind of hasn't kept up with the declines, the greater declines in pupils. Instructional salaries are generally higher in Covington and Allegheny. Some of your central administration salaries are higher in Allegheny than Covington, though, as you can see from the table. You have similar student characteristics, which makes it easier to consolidate. Some of the saving possibilities are trying to right-size your pupil-teacher ratio after you consolidate, particularly in Covington, to save you quite a bit of money. You could use an ERIP program to help get there to those consolidated savings. It would require some upfront money, I think, and that's where you might want to get the General Assembly to help you with some upfront money for an early retirement incentive program. Also, you might try to get the General Assembly, because you're going to have, if you try to keep everyone grandfathered into their pay as well, that's going to probably cost you around $500,000 initially, that part of it. But you can save money through lower salaries with newer people when they come in through that. You can save money through raising your pupil-teacher closer to the statewide average and Covington's average. Allegheny's quite a bit lower. You can save money through your central office consolidation. And you may try to ask for, you might be able to save money through health benefits, because you're quite rich there as well. You may like to stay there because that gets people to come to your locality and work here, so I wouldn't, that's up to you. Transportation cost savings could occur potentially, but these all occur over time, and so in the short term you might want to try to get, like has happened in the past through when consolidations have happened, the General Assembly, until very recently, you know this, would allow the lower LCI. That won't work in your case even to get it back, because that's less than $100,000, because it's about 1 point only, a little less than 1 point. That would save you about $80-some thousand currently. Maybe with the new budget, $100,000. So that really doesn't get you where you need to be. But so if you get them to help you with planning an ERIP and paying for help you pay for that, so you can get some of those longer-term savings, and then supporting you initially for the higher salaries you'll pay to equalize everyone, then you'd probably be able to make this work. And then over time, the state would save a lot of money, because you could probably save quite a bit, relatively speaking, with those what we're talking about here. And they would benefit as well, because they wouldn't have to put as much money into the combined school district as well. So that would be the selling point, is that a little bit of upfront money to get these longer term savings would help everyone.
How about capital outlay? What if we needed some capital outlay in order to achieve this for facilities?
What do you think, Dave? We didn't really look at that. We didn't really know what your capital outlay needs were.
In the case of Covington, the old high school probably needs a good bit of work. But the rest of the facilities for Covington are really quite good. In the case of Allegheny High School and the other schools, feeder schools to Allegheny High, the building itself is, I would say, maybe not great condition, but certainly good. No real flaws. Your elementary schools, the last time I looked, they were probably in need of a major repair, and I didn't go through it this time, so I'm not sure exactly what the status is. But last time, when I went through the elementary buildings, they were the old egg crate type of building, and probably for modern instructional purposes, they've long since outlived their usefulness. So on a long-term plan, probably should probably at least start thinking about replacement.
We are looking to do a facility study to really find out what we have to offer in all the buildings, and we all feel like whether we consolidate or not, it hasn't been done in 10 years to really take a look at all of our buildings. So,
It's almost always, as you go from school district or school division to division, it's always the elementary schools that lag behind.
Don't believe there's ever been at least a direct state involvement in capital outlay for consolidation. Of course, they've only done really the LCI thing, but there's nothing to point to say, the state's going to step in and help you with your capital issues.
Well, Jim, will you repeat what you said earlier about your thoughts on the governor's budget and funding and that excess money, and why he thought now was a good time to...
The governor's introduced budget was Tuesday, and it's an interesting. It was an interesting budget. I've seen a lot of them. Mr. Delegate Austin, I've seen 38 of them. So,
Of your age.
yeah, I am showing my age. So.
That's how long I worked for Virginia.
Not as long as him. But this was quite an interesting one. This is my view, and I'm going to be doing presentations on this because I do a lot of those on this subject. He has a pretty conservative first-year forecast, only 1.8% revenue growth. I find that to be quite conservative. He's being conservative because he's worried about the taxpayer behavior of non-withholding or wealthier individuals in the spring. Because right now things are going quite well. We're running at 8.5% through the first 5 months, revenue growth for the general fund. So he's expecting a big, and part of it's due to the new tax policy changes the state did last year for increased standard deduction and the itemized property taxes, if you itemize. So, but we have a 28% year-to-date increase in the stock market too. And so I think the risks are the upside in this year. He's more normalized in the second 21 and 22. It's about 4% revenue growth, which is kind of average. Yes, no recession is, but the thing is, there's some built-in safety valves in this budget. He's got a $300 million revenue reserve in the second year he's put in. He's got two $100 million contingencies just sort of there. $100 million the first year, $100 million the second year. I've never seen that. Just kind of lay it out there in his budget, say, here you go, General Assembly, spend it as you wish, so to speak. Although there is no state employee increase in there at all. Teacher salary increase is only in the second year. He put a lot of money into the at-risk add-on. He put it into guidance counselors. He put it in some ESL. He floated $150 million over the 2 years from games of skill. These lottery machines that are going out there, he sort of plugged that into the calculation. But that's up to the General Assembly to decide whether they're going to regulate it, whether they're going to get this revenue, and how much it really is. So that kind of take that out. But still,
regulate.
Yeah.
We have to regulate. We're losing way too much money on lottery because of the machines. But my fear is it's going to get caught up in the casino deal.
Right.
There's got to be a gambling deal of some sort. Those machines are going to be caught up in the legislation there.
I was wondering, sir, whether you just outlaw them.
Pardon?
Whether you just outlaw it, and so the revenue goes away.
We could.
So,
But now we need to
mine.
a lot money comes back to a lot. But I don't see that happening.
Right. So
Can I ask one question while we're talking about lottery and education? How much of the actual lottery fund now goes toward education?
all of it.
Here a couple of years ago, we restored it. We started restoring it incrementally. and
So
we
it's
got it
back
all.
to what was originally, okay.
Here's
It
how,
doesn't really make any difference.
No, it's minuscule.
They just took it from somewhere else.
no, here's how it works. The lottery is really general funds. That's how I think of it. So if the lottery goes up, it all technically by law goes into K-12. So you can never say it doesn't go there because by law it does. What happens is if the lottery goes up, let's say times are not as good, the General Assembly, the governor can reduce the general funds going in, so it becomes fungible. That's where there's always the complaint, is that, let's say the lottery goes from 600 to 650, times aren't so good, they'll just remove 50 million in general funds. The lottery's still going there, general funds, so it's really just part of the general fund pot, if you know what I mean. That's how it really works.
That's the way dedicated revenues work. Jim's exactly correct. And what I've always told my classes when I was teaching this subject is if the dedicated revenue meets or exceeds your needs, then it counts. But that's the only instance that it
Seldom does it ever do that.
I'll give you another example. So the governor's proposing a 30-cent increase in the tobacco tax. And so the tobacco tax money, we already have 30 cents. That goes into a healthcare fund. That fund is used to help the state match for Medicaid. Well, the rest of the state match is general funds. So as that goes up, general funds can go down. Same thing as the lottery. Okay?
Talked about was a 3% raise in the governor's budget for the second year of the biennium. Obviously, that's going to require a local match. Obviously, we're talking about creating a joint school system that doesn't cut positions. That we're talking about losing people through attrition. So the idea that we are going to run a very inefficient school system until we see people either use the E-RIT or attrition runs its course. Our SOQ numbers are going to be way skewed. So it's going to be a much larger local match to fund a raise, is the way I look at it. So I would like to see us think about the idea of taking the numbers from both school systems, SOQ numbers from both school systems, and creating possibly making that part of legislation. So for 6 years we get to use the numbers from 2 school systems rather than just one, because we will be inefficient. And I know that our local governments can't really afford to. I mean, it's typically a stretch for us every time we give a raise. You know, the local match part is a stretch. But if we're not going to fund it for all the SOQ positions and we have a lot more people working, I think we're going to need help from the state in that. Do you all think that that's
Well, using both is not going to help you other than a few isolated cases, like the superintendent, let's say. You know, if the state would fund both. The state, I asked this question because you asked it to me. So the state split funds, let's say Emporia, Greensville, or Williamsburg, James City, you know, those combined school systems. The only one that doesn't is, and I don't know exactly why, but is Fairfax City and Fairfax. They give each one money for a superintendent each. So, but the rest of the funding formula is going to be based on your numbers of, you know, your student counts and your pupil ratios. There's going to be a few isolated instances where you might, you know, principal, they'll give you for principals depending on how many students you have, you know, that sort of thing. So by saying I'm going to give you, well, that doesn't really work other than a few isolated, like the superintendent. You could get them to do that, but most of it is not going to be based on, it's going to be based on just your per pupil, your pupils.
right? But I mean, if we have one system that has 100 students and one system that has 90, and they're funding us for every 10 students, you know, they're going to combined. We're not going to get as much funding as we could separate. Because you also get a counselor for every 90 or 100 students.
But you have more, the combined system is going to have, instead of having 2,000 here and 1,000 here, you're going to have 3,000, so you're going to get funding for
Right,
the count more counselors.
But correct me if I'm wrong, the way the current SOQs work, if you have 30 students, you still get funding for that one counselor. Is that
No, it doesn't work like that. It's like you get a counselor for like one for every 250 students.
Well, I know, I realize those are the actual numbers, but
Yeah.
if you have a school system that only has so many students, you still get funding for a superintendent, for example. If you have 900 students, but you also get them for a certain number of.
But you actually
Principal.
don't. You actually don't get the funding for, let's say, assistant principal. If you don't have enough, you won't get the full funding. You only get partial.
So by the
So.
economies of scale, you're better off to go with a greater number.
My point is, you're going to be the same combined. You're going to get the same amount, more or less, whether you're separate or combined from the state. You're going to get the same. That's not going to get you more money, other than a few isolated cases, like you might work out a superintendent.
With Rockbridge's early retirement, could you, I know it's in here, but could you just elaborate on that a little bit? What kind of incentives did they offer?
They provided a 15% of salary incentive for 7 years, plus your health benefits that you had a year before you retired. So you couldn't change after you took the ERIP to something more lucrative. You had to use the one you were using. And they provided that for 7 years with the condition that you provide, and they paid it on a daily basis, that 15%. You had to work 20 days. So the teachers, what they would do, they became substitute teachers. And they would get paid in that 15% on a daily rate. And they had to work a minimum, I think it was 15 days to get it, or 10 days, one of the two. There was a minimum they had to do to qualify, keep getting that 15%. But they got paid, if they only worked, they didn't work the full 20 days, they got a percentage of that 15%. They got their health benefits too. They had to work a certain number to continue to qualify for the whole thing.
7 years or until they turn 65, is it?
You got in here 200 hours per contract at 15%.
A lot of times you do something like that.
And you don't have to, that was just one example. You could design your own, but the whole idea was, the whole idea is you give them a small percentage of their salary, but they have to perform some service, and then they get their health benefits and that small percentage of salary. They have to perform a service as well, a very part-time service.
So, Delegate Austin, could we set up a future planning, like an equalization term of 7 years, where the attrition period, the equalization period, is that something that's a feasible?
We can do it, we can ask, Matt, we can ask for anything we want.
Scrape them off the ceiling initially,
Right,
work back
right.
down.
I mean, but there have been some poor consolidations in the past. Bedford County, I think, Jim, you probably know about that. And I know that has left somewhat of a bad taste in the mouth in Richmond in regard to consolidation. Now, Susan Hogue, who has been working with us, is no longer in appropriations. So I don't know who we're going to be working with going forward. But certainly, yes, we can ask for anyone we want. And we'll lobby hard for whatever you ask for. I just can't guarantee you what we'll get.
We have to have
It's got to be a plan.
structured plan,
It's
right?
got to be a plan. And I don't know, what, Rockbridge, how long ago was that done, Jim? I mean,
Not long.
Okay, good.
2017.
okay,
Yeah.
good. Yeah. Well, more recent, there's been an action done.
But is it just teachers, or is it central office people? Is it also, there's lots of other folks, your support positions that are also towards the end of their careers that have more than 30 years experience. A lot of them.
And what kind of financial impact the transition would make, how to customize that.
I looked at like all your, in Allegheny, I think almost every single one of your custodians had more than 30 years experience.
We should try to ask for a salary difference.
That would be my initial recommendation, is ask for that $500,000 to equalize your salaries, and then ask for money over a period of time to help fund your ERIP. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be 7 years, because you're going to start saving money if it works right. You're going to more than cover that. So it doesn't have to be
The
7
old
years.
consolidation incentive program, they funded us for 15 years. So I'd hit them with 15.
And we're still paying for the Bedford thing. I mean, every session, there's a fear that will be, I mean, Tommy Norman took great issue with that a few years ago, and it almost got dissolved, but it hasn't. So, you know, there's this whole thing's under a microscope, although I think now is a perfect time for it, because there is a huge incentive to merge school divisions in Southwest Virginia. We have declining population, we have a lot of inflated costs because of overhead. So I think, as I've said in the past, I think if we could put together a plan that you all feel will work for you and is acceptable to both divisions, I think now may be a good time to make a presentation to the body. But I think it's going to be modeled. And so I think it will be scrutinized. Now we can ask for whatever.
If you go and ask for it, this could become a model, as you're saying. You ask for the monies for a period of time, and I would suggest not 15 years, something way less than that, to cover the equalized salaries, knowing that you're going to start saving money too, and other people are going to know. That's the whole idea of consolidation. And then you get them to fund some of the ERIP, maybe even the whole amount the first year or two, and then you start declining both of those. So you don't keep it. Let's say you ask for $750,000. Goes down, starts going down as you save money. And that way you're showing the General Assembly that you're expecting there to be long-term savings, and then it goes away because you have more long-term savings than you have costs. And that's how you sell it.
So if we bring salaries to a level field between Allegheny and Covington, there's really will be no incentive for the Covington employees who want to retire to stay, because they're not going to recognize the 3 years benefit for their VRS through the increase of salary. Now, Allegheny teachers will recognize an increase of salary. So in 3 years, they'll recognize that on their retirement. Will we not see somewhat a consideration of maybe the Covington employees who are at retirement age who potentially want to retire? Is that, what are the thoughts in the room on that? I mean, is that a potential?
Can I add something to that,
Sure.
sir?
Yeah.
So the governor's proposing, for example, a 3% salary increase. Let's say that goes through in July 1st of
So let's say those 3
2022.
years.
So those Covington folks would benefit from that.
Sure.
Assuming that that's the only
Provided
thing
the
that happens.
locality can make a match.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, you know, I assume you would, but, you know, so there would be that. I mean, they would get salary increases too, along with everyone else. It's just that you would do this initial, bring them up, and then everyone would get increases just like they normally would from that point on.
And you can't very well give salary increases to teachers and not give it to classified.
But his proposal is to do it for everyone.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it is, not just teachers. Yeah, it's not just teachers.
That's
It's
That's the
all,
first time
it's
that's
all
happened in a
employees
long
of the
time.
school system.
Yeah.
But it's not all state employees.
No, he's not giving any, he didn't
No
give state employees.
No raises for state employees.
I'm saying, only about 2/3 of the positions as a state are covered by the SOQ.
Well, we have to pick up about 60% of the cost. 40% comes from the state. So we pick up about 60% between the positions aren't covered in the
It depends on the locality. You probably do better than that in this area because your LCI is low.
60%. I'm in Allegheny superintendent, so.
But I think you probably do better than that, though. The state probably picks up more.
Spread it among everybody?
Yeah.
Gene? Yeah, okay.